Welcome to A Little TLC, the podcast where we embark on an enlightening journey through the ever-evolving world of education. I'm your host, Heather Volchko, and I'm on a mission to empower educators and change makers to skillfully navigate the intricacies of serving our most exceptional students. Every month, we'll be exploring a unique and timely theme in a mini-series format, whether we're digging into inclusive teaching practices, addressing student mental health challenges, or exploring the intricate connection between our personal and professional lives. Each month offers an in-depth exploration of weekly topics that truly matter. I hope you're ready to be both challenged and inspired because this is A Little TLC. So this month we are talking all about self-care, and not because any of us are experts, but because we are all in the middle of trying to figure it out and learn it as we go. So with me this month, I'm super excited to have Chris as well as Claire, and we all come at this from completely different angles and completely different seasons of life. So I'm super excited to see where this month goes. Thanks for joining me, Chris and Claire.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to kick us off with just what is self-care, right? Like we're talking about this whole blueprint, this concept that there's sort of like a planful aspect to, we're choosing to care for ourselves while we're caring for other people. But with this concept of a blueprint, it's like there's some intentionality around it. So what is this that we are prioritizing?
So, you hit the nail on the head with self-care. There is some intentionality, right? When we're looking at how we care for ourselves, how we build ourselves to be resilient individuals, and come at it from different ways. Honestly, there's no one set plan that works for everybody in this. And it will be at different phases, different stages, different approaches. Some things that work for me might not work for either of you. But it's all about taking care of ourselves and keeping ourselves in a balanced place, in my opinion, that we are able to function appropriately and able to meet the obligations that we have around us. It's, something that I think is understated, and it's more important than I think we give credit to.
Interesting. What do you think, Claire?
Well, for me, self-care is kind of like making sure that you can recognize when things aren't going good in your life, and you can take that step back and put yourself first. So kind of like being selfish for yourself to be able to like prosper and get better and do better for like not only yourself, but then I guess others out there as well.
Well, and I love the way you're talking about that too, is saying that there is an aspect of prioritization, but it's like temporary. It's like I'm prioritizing this way in this moment so that I can prioritize in a different way in another moment.
Yeah. I feel like that's for me a lot, like because I'm still in school right now, like I have to prioritize school before my work, which even though that sounds like vice versa, that's not like my priorities right now because my priority is to graduate, then to be able to get into the job and then succeed in those kind of contexts. So it's literally different for every single person. And then my priorities will switch as soon as I'm out of school. Then my priority will be my job and my career and so forth.
So it's like fluid adaptation, right? We're constantly, as we're changing as individuals and our experiences are changing and the obligations and expectations around us and the environment change, so is our self-care needs, right?
There's a lot of other components with it as well, like your mental health and your physical health, and then your emotional health as well. Like those, even though mental and emotional sound more so similar, like they're all different. Like mental is more like mindfulness, and then emotional would be like self-reflection.
And regulation, right? Recognizing where you're at in that moment. And I agree. And it's, as you look at those different areas, right, all of those falling under a blueprint, sometimes, and I've found that, I will placate to my strengths oftentimes when I feel that I have to get back and, help myself because I'm in a situation where I'm feeling either overwhelmed or I can feel anxiety starting to build. And oftentimes I'll say, okay, well, I can hit this hard from the physical side. This is what I know what to do. This is the old guard. It's the most common approach for me. And I might do it through jogging or I might do it through weightlifting. And it's really easy to fall into that pattern of hitting the strengths and not intentionally, but forgetting, that mental or that emotional or even that social side of it. Because if any one of those are left unchecked or even left to kind of wither on the vine, it still carries with it the same weight that it would otherwise. And for me, it's been a very interesting, and I know, Heather, you've known kind of my past and where I've been and what I've done.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I would focus so heavily on the physical side, and you forget the critical importance in all those other areas that you were mentioning in that blueprint, and it's really important, Claire. I think you hit the nail on the head when you were saying you have all of those other areas that are encompassed in this. And if you would have
Yeah.
asked that question 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I got to do this physical, or I got to focus on these two things, and I'll get right back at it.
Yeah.
And that can't be further from the truth.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I love that there's like this aspect of reflection in here too. But I mean, that's Claire. That's exactly what Claire was just talking about, where she's like, well, there is like this emotional aspect to it, and so for you, the emotional aspect was basically non-existent. It was brute force it, right?
Right.
Like I can stay up later, I can push my body harder, I can work out to compensate for whatever, and just kind of overlooking maybe the emotional aspect of it. And I think like there are kind of two camps when it comes to self-care. One being, if I'm pushing myself constantly in this way, so like for me and a lot of my work is like I am mentally pushing myself on the daily. Um so for my self-care, then I would maybe choose something that's not in that domain. So then maybe for self-care, I'm going to work out, or I'm going to spend time with friends, or I'm going to kind of leverage a different area to sort of balance out, kind of my life experience. The other camp, though, says to be intentional about the exact same area. So if in my work I am really pushing myself mentally, well, then maybe for self care, I choose to have moments in my schedule where I am actively not, really pushing mentally and allowing that rest and allowing that pause. I think both, especially in my life, I've had different seasons where I've really needed a combination of a whole variety of different ones. So I don't know that I have like a this is the approach for me and that other one is not for me. It's definitely come and gone with different seasons of different things that are showing up in kind of the demands on my life, and then
Mhm.
how I'm both wanting to and able to, which are not always the same,
Right.
being able to kind of navigate how do I keep myself sane in the midst of, everything else that is going on.
If you start to neglect one area, you'll start
Mm,
to burn out. And burnout is the point to like where you can no longer do anything or have the motivation to complete anything. Maybe that's just like me, but like burnout is what I never want to go to. So that's why I like to make sure like I'm really considering myself and trying to like put myself before so I don't burn out.
Yeah, that is very crucially
well
important.
stated.
I mean, there's, and as somebody who played that burnout game for a long, long time, the weird part is it's always, everybody refers to it as self-care, but the thing that I've learned in this journey of going through this, right, and trying to continuously evolve, it ultimately just makes you a more well-rounded and accessible person to
Mm,
those around you in that process. And as much as people will say, oh, you're working on yourself and it's self-care, but the reality of it is, sure, you reap the benefits of what you're working through, but so does everybody else around you. And if you look at
mm.
the most important things in the fabric of life, we're really here as social creatures. We are here for those around us, for the environments and the experiences. And so, yeah, sure, it's self-care. You're right. But it also puts you in a position to be more accessible to those experiences, to those people around you in a well-regulated state where you're able to actually be present in the moment.
I mean, these are things that we teach to our students all the time, right? Why are we surprised when we don't turn them back around to our own selves?
I feel like I've heard that in the context of like you have to love yourself before you can give love to others. Like that's exactly that. Like how are you supposed to do anything for anyone else if like if your mental's not good, you can't like take care of yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, another one of those sayings is the whole like you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Oh, I
Mhm.
thought you were going to go with you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you put the oxygen mask on everyone else.
See, there you go,
Yeah, there we
right?
go. I love how the examples get significantly more crisis related as we went through them, right? But the reality of it is, it you cannot you cannot overstate the importance of taking care of yourself, really being in tune and doing this. I mean, when you mentioned it before, Claire, that self-reflection, looking at yourself, constantly keeping it as that balance, not as if it will work, just kind of a litmus test of where you're at. It's so spot on. And I think oftentimes, at least I can speak for myself, that I would lose touch with that due to the obligations or the drive of the things that you have. In education, nobody goes into this profession to be rich. We know that. It's a labor of love all day, every day, in the hopes that what we do will impact people beyond us. And you can get yourself into a situation where you're motivated and you're pushing so hard that you can hit some of these areas hard. You can say, well, I'm working out, so I'm okay. I've got time for this. I've got time for that. But there can still be that void that pulls you back, and you can get burned out very quickly. And I think it was so wise for you to say, constantly reflecting, constantly checking, constantly making sure that that litmus testing is there to make sure you're aware and that it's fluid. And most people, we're creatures of habit. We're going to get in that pattern. And the thing is what worked for me 6 months ago might not work for me in 6 months.
Right.
And it's easy to get stuck in that rung. And if you don't do those self check-ins, if you're not looking at yourself, if you're not doing it from an objective perspective and being jaded by your responsibilities and where you're at in that moment, it's easy to miss things and just keep plugging along, keep chugging, and it can take you one step closer to burnout, right to the precipice.
This week, it's Webinar Week. Dive into an exclusive webinar featuring insights from practitioners just like you, who've achieved remarkable success in their own corners of our education world. Whether you aspire to advance your career, explore new possibilities, or simply expand your horizons, our webinars cover a vast array of topics. Pre-recorded webinars offer the flexibility you need to fit learning into your busy life. You have the power to watch, rewind, and replay the content at your convenience. And did we mention you can earn continuing education units too? But that's not all. By becoming a member of the TLC Network, you gain access to professionals committed to walking this experience together. Learners get access to valuable webinars, enriching workshops, and engaging guest hangouts. Supporters gain access to our vibrant online community, monthly Q&A sessions, and joint discussions in a little PLC. Clever, right? Either way, you'll be among the first to access our podcast and blog pairing every week. Don't let time constraints hold you back. Embrace this incredible opportunity to invest in yourself and your profession. Join us for this week's webinar and seize the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive on your terms.
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to challenge you for a second here, Chris, because you and I both have been in moments where it's like, we see it, we're driving, we're getting there, we're going, right? And there's this, when I get to, there's this somewhere in the future moment that I then get to, lean off the gas and I get to right, exactly. Like now all of a sudden the push is worth it. And now I can choose self-care. But that's not exactly what you're saying right now. So I'm curious for you, connect those dots for me.
For sure. Absolutely. So the way I used to do it was all compartmentalized, right? And the saying I used to say to you is I will squeeze every water out of this rock I call life, right?
Yeah.
And if knowing me and working with me, that's what I did. And I still thought in the past, I would think that was a direct reflection on my abilities and my level of dedication and what I can do. But the reality of it is when I would compartmentalize it, and that's what I was, compartmentalizing completely. I would say, okay, this is time for work, and this is time for play, and this is time for self-care. But the reality of it is, if you compartmentalize it and chug and go along and get to a point where you're like, all right, I've made it, I'm going to plant my seed here. Most of the time, you get to the point and you see something on the horizon, and you're constantly chasing that and going. And you can get to a point where you haven't arrived at your destination because that destination is constantly changing. But if you have an ongoing process where you're checking in, I mean, no is one of the smallest words in the English language and one of the hardest to say, especially in education, because when you're saying no and negating something, maybe it's something that somebody truly, absolutely needed. And so you confound yourself with all these yeses, and you can bury yourself with them. But it can absolutely wreck you mentally or emotionally or socially in those things. And you've created this inadvertent barrier around you. And so the way I used to look at a lot of things is that destination, get to that point, get to here, get to there. But the reality of it is I figured out, and you and I working together, I'll be honest with you, helped me realize like it's never going to end. The race will never end. You're going to continue moving that flag further and further. It'll never be enough. And you got to take care of yourself along the way. And I think if you can interject that incrementally throughout that journey, it's going to change not only your pacing, but it's going to change your outlook on things. It's going to make you more available. And let's be behavioral. It's going to reintroduce things that are strong reinforcers to you in this world that you may have neglected, overlooked. But you got to stop and what you used to say? You got to stop and take a look around you to see the field you're standing in, right? Because
pick your head up, pick your head up and look around.
Because you can get so blindsided and so tunnel vision. We have to take care of ourselves to take care of others.
That's so true, though, in any human services, right? I know we're talking about it from the educator side or from the school side, but anyone in human services, any behavior analyst, no matter what field we're in, nursing is just as big, right? Like anybody who is in that like my field is caring for humans. And that's where, Claire, I love your perspective on this because you're coming straight in hot out of school being like, I am not going to screw this up day one. And me and Chris are over here being like, dude, we screwed up.
Kind of, yeah. Like we got caught in the mode of work and that push, but so wise beyond your years. You have no idea. I wish I was saying this 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
I view my parents as well. Like I see them like working so hard every single day, and like they still to this day like work 9 to 5s every single day, working, getting up, and like I look at them and I'm like, how are you doing this for 40 years? Like I am tired after 2 years of it. Like I graduated my undergrad 2 years ago, so I've been working like full time since then, and I'm already tired. So like if I was recognizing that right off the bat, I was like, I need to take a step back for myself and start putting myself first, because it's not going to be good for my future if like I don't truly love what I'm going into. Like, and I do, because ABA and like ever since high school, like this is the only thing that's ever clicked for me. So I want to make sure I have that passion. And I do.
You can change the world with ABA. I truly believe it. I truly believe it.
Loved it since the moment I've learned about it. And I didn't even learn about it until my freshman year of college because I went in undecided.
Yeah. And I think as we're talking about that self-care and going through this, there has to be a level of intentionality to it. This isn't something that you stumble into. You can't fake it till you make it. Because the reality of it is sometimes you will take yourself down a path to a point where you stand up, you look around of where you're at in the field, and you're lost as hell. Let's be honest. And then you really have to figure out what you need to do to get out of that. You've backed yourself into a corner. So as you're doing it incrementally and going through that process, right? Checking in with yourself, just like what you were saying before, making sure all those changes. And it's not a chore. In the beginning, it's weird. For me, it was weird. I was like, I'm just going to plug through this. Eventually, like everything else, it will subside, right? But the thing that hit me is, as crazy as it is that higher understanding of, even though the listing is self-care, it really has the larger impact on the world around you because of who you are, who you become, and what you're able to be available for when you're doing it, than it does for you. It well rounds you as an individual. Let's be honest. It gives you skills and coping strategies and stuff, but where that pay dirt is past you. It really is. And I had a moment, and I've told this story to you, Heather, many times, where I was in the thick of a lot of stuff, working in education, a lot of hours. And my daughter said something to me about dinner time. And she turned to me and said, hey, do you know that in the last month or so, you've only eat with the family maybe twice a week, maybe once a week, because you're constantly working. And it was in the conversation of, hey, what do you guys want to do when you get older? We were talking about pipe dreams. And my one daughter, as ruthless and awesome as it was, said, what do you do, Dad? I don't want to do that. And I was like, what? I love my job. But then the reality kicked in is like, man, I let myself go without taking care of myself to a point where I'm no longer as available to others around me. I haven't checked in with myself. I haven't made sure that I'm taking all these other areas, like the emotional side, right? The social side of it. And even if I dipped hard on the physical side, you know what? When you work out, you kind of do it alone, right? And so you have to have that balance. And that was the moment where it was like, this is really not about me. It is about me, but it's really not. But it is.
I love that it's like this little tiny behavior analyst being like, what do you do? Oh, that. Well, I've been doing that on you. I've been taking data and your dinner frequency count is not okay.
Right. Exactly. We have dipped below the criteria for success, my friend.
Yes. Well, hey, I think I'm going to pause this conversation because that leads straight in where we're headed next week. So next week, this is not all just easy, right? It is full of pros and cons and hard choices and trying to figure out how to have priorities when all of them seem like the priority. And truly, like there's just a lot of things that get in the way of choosing to engage in self-care. And that's where we're at next week. Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, we want to invite you to head over to thresholdlearning.org, your one-stop destination for all things TLC. Here you'll find our blog with this episode's show notes, our ever-expanding bookshelf of resources, and anything else we've talked about. Trust us, there's a ton of benefits waiting for you to explore. Just head over to thresholdlearning.org, click on Network, and we'll see you on the inside. Sharing the podcast with your colleagues is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at Threshold Learning TLC on Facebook and Instagram. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast. Let them know they can listen on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere else they catch their podcasts. Just be sure to leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. You can email us at info@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. You can find everything you're looking for at thresholdlearning.org. See you there.